One of the really exciting areas in AI is AI in hardware. And there's been a brand new tool that was unveiled at the CES 2024 in Las Vegas, and that is the Rabbit. This is a very interesting piece of AI hardware device. Connor, I know you've been watching their videos, you've been sending me messages about what they're building. Give everyone a little rundown on what Rabbit is exactly and why you think this is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's and you're totally right, right? I mean, 2024 is, I think, going to be the year of hardware. I think that it just sort of has to be. Sam Altman is trying to build something. Probably, Jaden, you and I on the show a few times have talked about the humane AI pin, which is a little controversial. I love it. I think it's just really cool. It's a way of sort of like interacting with AI and interacting with the world without having a smartphone. And as somebody who has teenagers, I love this idea. It's also just a beautiful thing. But Rabbit has also really captured the imagination of folks. So Rabbit, if you've seen it, by the way, Jaden, I watched the 25-minute talk on this, like the demo. Jaden, what kind of demo is 25 minutes long? It felt like an eternity in the TikTok world. But here we are. And the CEO gets up there, Jesse, super sweet guy, kind of on a TED sort of stage. I don't know if you saw this or not. And he pulls out the Rabbit, right, which is this piece of hardware, kind of like an orange box. Looks like a little speak and spell or something like that. Looks a little goofy, sort of like has a tiny camera on it and everything like that. But immediately when he gets into it, it's interesting, right? And you're sort of like waiting to see where this thing will go. Now, at the very basic sort of like level, this is essentially, it has a little bit of like a walkie-talkie button on it kind of thing, and you pull it out and it has a screen on it. And the whole thing about this is, well, a couple things. Number one, it's almost like a little portable ChatGPT. So some of the examples he was giving was like, gosh, I wish I could remember them exactly, but I think he said like, what's the nature of reality or something like that. And then, how big does an oak tree go? So let me say first, I'm always sympathetic to people trying to do use cases on ChatGPT because they're all going to be goofy because everybody wants different things. But so, no shade there. But that, in itself is pretty interesting, sort of similar to what Humane Pin does. So instead of pulling out your phone, like the AI pin, you just sort of say like, hey, blah, 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 search this or do this, or can you tell me this? So that right off the bat, that's becoming, I think, the sort of table stakes for a piece of hardware. Now, what's really interesting about Rabbit is, I think anyway, is that it's actually creating a kind of a new kind of model, right? Almost like a new foundation model, right? And that's going from LLM to, I think, what they're calling LAM, which is instead of large language model, it's a large action model. And I was kind of going deep into this a little bit, but I was just sort of like pulling up some notes on this. But essentially, like what it is it's going to be essentially what you want agents to be doing, right? So I sort of had to wait till the end of the 25 minutes to see how this does this, and then I'll shut up because I want to get your reaction on this, Jaden. But I think this is important. So essentially, you can sync this thing up with, Open Table and Kayak and I don't know, American Airlines and all that kind of stuff. And you can actually do it like you would do an autonomous agent. As you know, the autonomous agent front is huge because it's not just sort of telling you, hey, what's out there, but it actually takes things on your behalf. So the example that he was giving, I might have it wrong, but it's like, hey, I'm going to Rome. Give me, 2 nonstop flights, 2 flights for kids. Give me a good hotel, all that kind of stuff. And it actually brings it up pretty well. Now, I cannot speak to the efficacy and the quality of the outcome, but that's what it's trying to do. Now, there's something on kind of the front end where you have to sync it to your laptop and upload the programs that you want, things like that. But I don't know, Jaden, like this is like really interesting. And as you always say, look, we're at the beginning here. But Jaden, if I throw all that at you, like what's your initial reaction on that stuff?
Yeah, okay, so I'm excited. AI hardware excites me. Any new devices excite me. The thing that's most exciting is the price point. What is it, like 299 or
Yeah,
something?
no, 199. It's $200.
199. Okay, so like $200 compared to the AI, the Humane Pin, which is like $800. I believe it definitely is a little bit more attainable of a price. It feels maybe less like an iPhone and more like here's an interesting, useful little tool that you might buy for everyone. I'll be curious to see what kind of adoption it gets. Now, I think there's a lot of really interesting use cases, and those interesting use cases are this is are like AI, but they're not I don't know if they have to be a device. And that's that's my question for you that I'd love to get your opinion on, because I know you love hardware and you've talked about the Humane Pin and how you think it's cool. Is this something though that needs to be its own device, or is it fun to be its own device? Could
Okay,
this
Jaden,
just be an iPhone app?
this is such a good question that you're asking, right? Because this goes to the heart of everything. Like, how many inventions were like, well, I don't need that because I can just, all I have to do is go to the grocery store. Why do I need something like, Uber Eats delivering my groceries? Like, what you've touched upon right there is absolutely critical. So, just first, in terms of the pricing, I think it's $199 for the Rabbit. I think Humane Pin, I think the AI Pin is 600, but then there's a subscription model along with it. But Jaden, don't you feel like it's a leading question there clearly, but like, don't you feel like things like, apps and hardware and things like that, it's not about whether or not like you need it. It's like, do people love it or not? I mean, you think about all these social media platforms like, Be Real and stuff like that. Like, all of them are, to me, as like, I don't want to say I'm a Luddite. I just don't love social media other than LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn, follow me and Jaden on LinkedIn, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. They all seem kind of similar to me. I'm like, well, why? I'm asking my 14-year-old and 12-year-old, like, well, why are you even interested in this one? It does the exact same thing. And they're like, Dad, how can you possibly say that this does the same thing? Are you out of your mind, right? And this is the thing, right? I'm seeing something like the Humane Pin. I'm seeing something like Rabbit. And I'm like, I use ChatGPT all the time on my phone. Now, can I just press it on my phone? Is my phone already in my hand? Yes, absolutely. But is there something about having a different device? And now here's the other thing with the Rabbit. Like, it's a little, it's not, I don't mean it's bulky at all. It's not, it's small, all that kind of stuff. But I'm just like, I'm having and I may be proven crazy wrong on this, but it does feel a little bit like the iPhone. Like, everything I can do on that, I can kind of do on the iPhone. So I'm not sure that would be the thing for me. Now, at $199, am I dying to try it out? Absolutely. I think the thing about the AI Pin, and people have been sort of throwing some shade at the AI Pin, being like, oh, that's not going anywhere. Whereas this Rabbit thing. But the thing about the AI Pin is that just like it sits on you, you just talk to it as if it's sort of like floating along with you. So, Jaden, to kind of like, that's a very long way of coming back to, do people need this if they already have an app on the phone? How do you think about that? Because I think that that's what is the difference between Google Glass and, and a billion-dollar company.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, to straw man that a little bit, because I'm like maybe more skeptical than you are on some of the hardware. Like, I think it's cool and I want to try it out, but like, I don't always have like the novelty things. I don't have like a folding phone or those kind of things. What I will say though, that I think is a good point you bring up, if people love it, it doesn't really matter if it could be an iPhone app, right? And I think about, so for example, my wife has like this thing that's called like a Yodo player for our kids. And it's like essentially just a giant Bluetooth speaker, and you get these little cards that have like a story on them, and you slide them in the top, and it plays like the story, and it can play like some little like children's podcasts and like radio music that's cool for like okay for kids and stuff. Anyways, she has this device. All of the features on this could just be an app, right? You could just have an audiobook app for kids that also has like some radio and also has like little kids podcast on it. It's just plain audio. But it's like this really well designed, really cute packaged like device. And I think what people like is like, you could just give this thing to your kid. You're not worried that they're going to get on the internet and have any sort of issues, or you're not worried about you having to give them a phone or your phone. It's just a little device. And so like my 4-year-old, he runs around with his little Yoda player and he like listens to like French
awesome.
parts that teach him French. And I'm thrilled. I'm like, great. You just like go entertain yourself for like half an hour in your room listening to like someone tell a story in French. Like, that sounds great to me. So it could be an app, but it's a product and it's well designed. And I think we're seeing the same thing here with the Humane Pin and with Rabbit. If these things are like well designed, really cool products, they have a cool use case. You don't want to use your phone all the time, and people like a novel product. And the last product I'll give as an example to this is the Nintendo Switch. I myself am not a gamer, but I know a lot of people that love the Nintendo Switch, which really, like, what is it? It's just like a super big tablet that also has like a couple thumb controllers on it. Like, in reality, you could probably figure out how to do all that kind of stuff on an iPhone and an iPad, but people like having a designated device for that. And so I think there definitely is room for more devices, even though at the end of the day, we can figure out how to jam every device into a phone. I think it's cool sometimes to have these devices with unique single purpose.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I like it too. Your example of the kids stuff is a fantastic example because that's actually practical. Like you don't want your 4-year-old to break this, so I'm going to give it to this. Like Rabbit is the same kind of thing. Like it looks like, again, like we said, like a speak and spell, right? It just looks like an easy thing that you can just sort of like carry around with you, all that kind of stuff. I don't think it makes phone calls and all that kind of stuff, but it is just, will people want it or not? It might be like the cool thing. I mean, I have no idea why people wear Crocs everywhere. Crocs to me are absolutely ridiculous. Like, and yet, people love them. So there's no accounting for like what this thing could look like or anything like that, like this giant plastic molded thing. I think the AI pin looks very cool, but it's way more expensive. It's $600. Like, I mean, like, are people going to want to invest in that? I don't know. But here's the other thing, Jaden, that I want to sort of like just touch on as we're sort of like thinking about hardware, because the hardware case, you and I think both love the big swings. Like we love when people come out with this kind of stuff. Like, I mean, in CES over at in Vegas right now, the big consumer electronics show, they're coming out with some phenomenal things. Even some of these things that cost like $100,000. But again, big swings with AI is exciting. The only other thing I'd say on this is that I'm thinking about this too with like bland AI, with that sort of like thing that sends out 500,000 calls, a day or whatever. We should do a podcast on that at some point too. Sometimes you'll see a product and you'll look at, and then all of a sudden you look at like the underlying thing. You're like, the underlying thing is, I think this is on like the show Silicon Valley on the HBO too. Sometimes the underlying tech is almost more interesting than the product itself, right? And so what they're building is this LAM instead of LLM. And I was kind of like looking up, like, and there's not a lot of information because it's probably super proprietary about what it is, but I was asking ChatGPT to sort of like help me figure this out. And it was essentially saying that the mechanisms, it's likely a natural language input, and then it has to understand the intent behind it and then translate that intent into a series of actions or commands that can be executed by an application. And then on the training data, apart from linguistic data, LAMs might also require training on data sets that include user interaction patterns, command execution sequences, interface interactions to understand how different tasks are performed across different software platforms. And like because it's going to sort of like have to figure out, there's a higher bar here to figure out like, well, if you want to, I want to go to Rome. Now, if it's going to execute on it, there's like a higher bar there. So in a way, to me, the underlying software is almost more interesting than the product itself,
100%. Yeah. And I think like we always say, it's early days. These things get better. They add new features. It's exciting. And the big question for me with the hardware side of things is like, can the less powerful version now be exciting enough that it can get some adoption so they can iterate? Because the big problem is if it doesn't get enough excitement, it doesn't do enough, then it won't get enough adoption, they can't iterate, and the company won't be able to grow. So I think it's exciting. It all kind of depends on some of this early traction they get, so it's definitely something we'll be following closely. AI and hardware is a fascinating topic. To the listener, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. If you learned something new about AI hardware and this is kind of interesting to you, it would mean the world to us if you could leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. It helps new people find the podcast, so it is amazing if you're able to do that. But we all hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.